Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cycle Podcast. Today, I have Cara with me. Welcome to the show, Cara. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, we are interested in hearing your story, and I look forward to learning more about your endo story. But before we start, I always like to start with tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Cara. I'm 21. My pronouns are she and her. I live in upstate New York, and I work in medical records at a cardiology office.
Okay. All right. And how's the weather been in upstate? Has it been a little chilly or
It's starting to get a little colder. I'm very excited.
It's a little colder here in Michigan too today. I have my little space heater on that I chat about on the podcast often, but it's sunny, but it's a little chilly. So yeah, for sure. Well, I want to jump right into your story, and you being 21, I'm just curious, it's a little bit of a younger age that I've chatted with. So I'm really curious, how in the beginning, how did you start to feel symptoms, or when, or, do you remember an age that you started to potentially feel symptoms, or anything now that you have endometriosis?
Yeah. So I started my period when I was 14, which was like later for my friend group, but whatever. And it was easy. Like it was 3 days. I had like the slightest back cramp, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting my period. And it was like 3 days later, I was fine.
Yeah.
I never had what I know now. I never had like front cramps. They were always in the back.
Always in the
and
back.
I didn't think anything of it because my mom had that, so it was fine.
Yeah.
And then about 3 years later, it just got more painful. It didn't get heavier. It was just so painful.
And so just in your back, or were you starting to have, okay.
Yeah. So I had told my pediatrician, because the only thing they ask is, do you get regular cycles? So yeah.
Sure.
And then I said, it's just getting more painful. And she goes, well, maybe you should see an OBGYN. So I was 17 at that point. And I thought, well, no, I'll pass. So I waited another year. And then each cycle got worse. Then I started having pain in the front. So I went to an OBGYN, which I went to the same doctor that my mom saw at the time, as you do.
Right.
And I had heard one of my friends in high school had endometriosis, and they told her when she was like 16 that she couldn't have kids, which whether or not that's true, I don't know. But that freaked me out because I've always wanted to be a mom ever since I could talk. I've always wanted to be a mom, and that's always been like the number one priority for me. So I was just terrified that that's what I had, because, painful periods are the first symptom.
Did you know, like, potentially because you had these painful cramps and they were getting increasingly worse, did you correlate it with endo because of this friend that you knew, or did you know what endometriosis was to have that fear?
Yeah, so it was partly that, and partly I had taken anatomy and physiology in college a few times because I failed the first time. And I knew what it was, and I knew the symptoms, and I was like, uh-oh.
Okay.
So I already had that.
And at this point, were you having any other symptoms that now you can reflect back on that may have been correlated, or was it really just really bad back cramps and then they got worse, and then finally you started to have, abdomen cramps?
So I always had the back pain. Okay. I always had what now I know I had vaginal pain when I was on my period, which I would tell my mom, my vagina hurts. And she's like, no, it's your uterus. And I was like, okay. Right. Sorry, Mom. I know she's going to listen to this. Sorry, Mom, but that's what she told me. And so I went into the doctors, and I had the concern of endometriosis, and I told her that.
Yeah. And this was your first OBGYN appointment ever?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And I just said, I want to have kids. That's all I care about is having kids. And she goes, well, you're a little young to have kids. So don't worry about that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. And she said, do you take anything for the pain? Does it help? And I was like, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And she goes, oh, then you don't have endometriosis. You're okay. Don't worry. And I was like, okay, cool. I left that doctor's office. I was so happy. I was like crying in tears because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have endometriosis. I'm so happy.
Did you have a pelvic exam as well at that appointment, or was it more just like an initial meet and greet?
No, she had me in the stirrups and she literally looked and then she was like, okay, you look good. But there was no like actual exam or anything.
Okay.
But I mean, she charted that she did a pelvic exam, but she didn't. And then, so at that appointment,
right. So you cried tears of joy.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And then I just continued with each cycle got worse.
Yeah.
Over the next year. And then I started having like ovulation pain and the period pain. And then I would have like painful bowel movements. That was the worst for me, was the bowel movements when I was on my period. That's the worst pain I've ever felt.
Yeah. As time was going on, pain was increasing, but not only around your cycle, but around ovulation and other times. And so now your symptoms are just kind of like growing at this point.
Yeah. And then all the blanks filled in, and then I'm in pain every day.
Yeah.
So the following year, so now I'm 18 or no, now I'm 19.
Okay.
And I will say she offered me birth control when I was 18. And I said, no, I really don't want to take that. I didn't really want to be on birth control anyway. And she said, well, if you don't want to take birth control, there's nothing I can do for you. And I was like, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know any difference.
Of course.
So then a year later, I went to a second gynecologist in the same practice. I just wanted to get a different opinion. And I said, at this point, I was like, I've been in pain every day for the past 2 weeks. I laugh about that now because I had pain every day for like years, but 2 weeks was a lot for me. Yeah. So I went and I said, I think I have endometriosis. I'm in a lot of pain. And she, I really don't want to like come on here and just talk crap about doctors, but I just had not so great experiences. She was sitting with her back towards me on the computer typing while I was talking to her. She didn't even look at me. And part of me was like, oh my God, she's charting. Like, that's awesome. I'm in medical records. I'm happy to see that. Right. But also like, I'm here.
Right.
But anyway, she didn't do a pelvic exam. She ordered an ultrasound, which I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And she never said anything about endometriosis. Every time I brought it up, she just deferred the conversation. But whatever. So I had an ultrasound a couple days later and there was fluid. So I had a cyst rupture. And I was like, well, when's this pain going to go away? And she said, okay, probably about, 1 or 2 weeks. So I was like, okay. And
did
the pain never went away.
Did she tell you that the cyst ruptured because of the fluid? Like when you got the results, was the speculation, okay, you probably had a cyst, it ruptured, that's why you're in pain.
Yeah, you're good to go now.
You're good to go. Right. You'll feel better in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So she tried to give me birth control.
Okay.
Which I didn't want to do again because I was very I'm fully aware I'm not the best patient because I'm very hard-headed. Because I
don't think
know
that
too much.
Means, no, I don't think that means you're a bad patient. I think that means you know what you want. You're advocating for yourself.
Yeah, they don't like that.
I know. I do know that. Yes, they don't like it.
So she was telling me all the different birth controls, and she was telling me, well, this one lowers your sex drive. And she goes, but you haven't had sex yet, so it looks like you never will. When I tell you my jaw was on the floor, my mother was sitting in the room and she was like, did she seriously just say that? And I thought she was like, she laughed about it. She genuinely, I'm 19 years old. I'm like, you're not allowed to come to me. Yeah.
Speechless.
So needless to say, I didn't see her again. So I made an appointment about 2 weeks later with a completely new practice.
Okay.
And I see a PA there. I still see her now. She's the best. But I told her, I think I have endometriosis. At this point now I'm having back pain. Now I'm having front pain. I'm having rectal pain, vaginal pain, hip pain, back pain, ovulation pain, menstrual pain. And then now it's every day.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So she's like, I really think you should take birth control. And I was like, no. So I waited a couple more months, and there was one day that I woke up and I was in excruciating pain on my left-hand side. So I called to get in for an ultrasound, and the nurse was like, well, if it's a cyst, there's really nothing we can do. So do you really want to see? Like, do you care? And I was like, yeah, I care.
Yeah.
Because I want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So she goes, well, let me see what the doctor says. I'll call you back. She called me back like 3 minutes later. She's like, so she wants you to come in right now. And I was like, okay. That's what I thought. So yeah. I went there and I had a golf ball size cyst on my left ovary, which it was literally like 1/10 of a millimeter away from being operable.
Yeah.
But, they cut that off. So they didn't take it out. We just let it, I guess,
stay,
fizzle away and slowly go away.
Yeah.
But it was big enough to where they wanted to check on it in, I think it was 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. To do a repeat ultrasound, and they did the repeat ultrasound and it was gone. But because it was so big, the risk of torsion is there. Yeah. So that's when I was like, okay, I really need to take birth control because this is scary.
Yeah.
So I was,
but at this point, like, still no mention of endo from the doctors, but are you in your gut, like, have you Googled it? Are you like, this is all endo, like every symptom I have? Because it seems like you really knew.
Yeah. I always knew something was wrong. Like, I just had a weird, like, and I'm grateful for the pain in a way, because I would have known.
Of course.
But it's like, I always had a weird intuition that something was wrong. And it was a fear because of, I just want to have kids and I want to be able to have kids.
Right.
So I was just terrified and nobody was listening to me.
And were you like Googling and determining like, okay, this bowel pain is related, that like, did you at that point understand that all of your symptoms were really related, or did you feel like, I'm not really sure what's going on?
I started to notice like stuff that was cyclical. Like I would notice like, I would have like bouts of constipation and diarrhea just on the period.
Yes.
And I was like trying to figure out like a trigger for food. And I couldn't, because something would bother me one day and then not the next.
Yeah.
And it was impossible for me to be like, oh, let me try, eliminating this or eliminating that. It was just.
Right. I think it's really helpful. I ask these questions because I think it's really helpful for people who are listening who have not received a diagnosis or maybe going through some of these things. And in the beginning, definitely for me, I had no idea all of my symptoms were related. I really thought my cramps were an isolated thing. I had no idea that all of these other things that were the daily pain and all of those things, that it was all related, like I didn't know that. So it sounds like intuitively you knew, and you knew what endometriosis was, but you just kept being told that you didn't have it.
Yeah. And my mom had some of the same symptoms, not all, but some. Yeah. So I was like, well, if she had it, then it's fine. And I would go back and forth to being like, oh my God, I'm crazy, to, oh my God, I have endometriosis. And I just couldn't, I don't know. I didn't believe myself.
Yeah, I understand. No, I totally, especially when you're being told that you don't have it, what are you supposed to do? So do you go on at this point, so that you have the other cyst, it shrinks, but you decide to go on birth control?
Yeah. So at this point I started, I think it was just a combination, typical low dose, whatever. I took that for 6 months.
Okay.
and it did not help me. It regulated my period great. Like I knew what hour it was coming, but that wasn't what I was going on it for.
Yeah.
I still had, so she told me to stop ovulation, but I still had like ovulation pain. So I took the little strips, the ovulation strips, and I was ovulating. So I'm like,
wow.
Okay, well, that's good. My ovaries are strong, but also, it's not what I'm taking this for. So,
you're taking it to solve the pain, and you're still having pain.
Yeah, so I took that for 6 months, and then she switched it like 3 more times. I honestly don't even know what the other ones were.
Yeah,
but nothing was doing anything for me. And I'm at this point, I just started a job. So this is a year ago, like right about now.
Okay.
I started in September of 2020. I just started this new job. I love it, but I'm in excruciating pain every single day. I have a heating pad at home. I have a heating pad at work.
Yeah.
And so the next thing that happens is I'll never forget this day. It was October 15th of 2020. I was in so much pain. I wasn't even on my period. I was just in agony.
Yeah.
And I spent my lunch break crying in my car because I was in so much pain.
Sorry.
And
where was the pain mostly? Like, if people are listening, like,
it felt like
cramping or like shooting down your leg, or
it was in my hips and my back, going down my legs, and then it felt like there was like barbed wire around my uterus, abdomen. And it was just being like pulled.
Yeah.
And I was on the phone with my mom, and she had found an endometriosis specialist at her job. She's a nurse at the hospital.
Okay.
And her first patient that day was an endo patient. And she had never seen this guy before. And so she pulled him aside. She's like, I normally don't do this, but I have to talk to you about my daughter. And he was like, I would have operated on her already.
And this was the same day that you called her when you were crying in the car.
Yeah.
That she met. I have like full chills in my whole
life. I do too.
So serendipitous. Oh my goodness.
So he was like, tell her to call my office. I'm accepting new patients. She sounds like endo. And I was like, wait, the endometriosis specialist thinks I have endometriosis? Like,
right.
Oh my gosh. So I still see the PA that I saw before. She's great for everything. She never doubted I had endometriosis, but she wanted me to go see GI, which I didn't do.
Yeah.
I'm not a good patient. I don't do what I'm told. She wanted me to see
No, you trust your intuition. I mean, it doesn't make you a bad patient.
Yeah, she wanted me to see orthopedic for the hip pain.
Yeah.
But I was like,
right. You knew.
Yeah. So I called his office, and I saw him like 12 days later.
Okay.
Which I could not believe. I called their office, and she's like, how about October 28th? And I was like, of this year? And she's like, yeah, next week. I was like, okay, that's fine.
I'm in. Whatever I need to do, I'm there.
So I just thought he was going to be super hard to get into.
Sure. But sure.
So I saw him, and he handed me a packet about endometriosis, and I was like, oh my gosh, like somebody believes me.
Yeah.
And that's sad. Like I just feel so bad, because I genuinely thought that I was just trying to find something wrong with me, because that's how my doctors made me feel. Like, give it a couple weeks, try this, try that, take Tylenol and Motrin around the clock. I can't do that every day. Like, I just couldn't do it anymore. So he sent me for an MRI, which I went for the MRI, and I got claustrophobic and left because I was terrified. So I ended up going to a open MRI machine like an hour away with Valium. It was fine.
That time was fine. I mean, those machines are some of the older
terrifying.
Ones. It's a
with
little
a mask
tight.
on.
It's a little it's a little tight. This is a good place for us to take. We're going to take just a quick break, and we're going to be right back.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, we are back. We were just talking with Cara. about MRI in the machine and being claustrophobic after she had met up with her new endometriosis specialist. So after the MRI, Cara, what happened?
So he also sent me for a colonoscopy. Well, he sent me to colorectal because I had rectal bleeding with my periods, which I didn't notice until they started me on, it's called norethindrone. So that was the first birth control that I took that wasn't in like the push out little packet. It was like in a pill bottle. So it was continuous. Okay. So I wouldn't get a period. I would still get all the symptoms, but I wouldn't bleed.
Right.
And that's when I noticed the cyclical rectal bleeding. Wow. And I was like, oh my God, like that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And at first I didn't say anything because I knew that they were going to send me for a colonoscopy, and I was like avoiding it at all costs.
Yeah.
But they sent me to the colorectal specialist, and he was like, yeah, you need a colonoscopy. I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
So I did that January of this year.
Okay.
And it was fine. There was no endometriosis he saw. Everything else was fine. So he said that sometimes like when it grows through the tissue, it can grow like 80% of the way through. But if it's not 100%, they won't see it on colonoscopy.
Yeah.
So I was like nervous. I was like, so what if I don't have endometriosis? Like I'm doing all this. I had a colonoscopy at 21.
Yeah.
That was humbling, by the way, being in a waiting office with a bunch of old men.
Yeah.
Like, this is not good. And the prep for that, pro tip, get Zofran. Just do yourself a favor and get Zofran.
Yeah, I've done a few bowel preps in my life. Knock on wood, I haven't had a colonoscopy, but I'm sure I'm going to have one at some point. But it's the same prep as the colonoscopy, and it's very rough.
Yeah, I had to do it for surgery too.
Yeah,
which was lovely. But anyway, so that was in January. So after I had the colonoscopy, they scheduled my surgery for February 11th. Yay! Except that's not what happened. COVID took over. So it ended up switching like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And then mid-February, she called me and she's like, all right, it's April 29th, 2021. You're on the books. It's not moving. I said, are you sure?
She said, yeah. You're like, how can you guarantee this right now?
Yeah. So the problem was I needed the colorectal surgeon in there too, because they thought it was on my bowel.
Right.
So getting his schedule, he was backed up because of COVID.
Sure.
And my endo specialist schedule, it was impossible for them to get it together, but they did. It worked out just fine. Right. So I'm still, at this point, I'm still in pain every day, but I know I have to wait another 2 months to have surgery. So it was not fun.
What were some of the things that you were doing to, manage it? Well, you have this new job. It's not as new, but you said use your heating pads. Were there any other things that you were doing to try and manage the pain?
Yeah. So I was just he doubled my norethindrone dose. Okay. So I was on 10 milligrams of that a day, which that kicked my butt because
I don't even know what that is.
It's just progesterone. It's progesterone only.
Okay, got it.
So that stops ovulation. I still had the ovulation pain, but whatever. I felt so sick when I took that. Yeah. And I basically had all the pregnancy symptoms without being pregnant.
Right.
And I was like, this is just a sick joke because all I want to do is be pregnant.
Yeah.
But I took double of that for probably about 4 months until surgery. And then I did the bowel prep for surgery.
Yeah.
Turns out I didn't need to because it was not on my bowel, but that's fine.
Better to be safe than sorry. But the bowel prep is, for anyone who's listening, if you haven't done a bowel prep, basically what you do is you drink, I think it's magnesium citrate. You drink a cocktail of things that make you empty your bowels. And basically what that means is probably almost constant diarrhea for about 24 hours and you feel extremely nauseous. I mean, that's my experience with it.
I can never look at blue Gatorade the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did watermelon. Have you ever seen that like watermelon water? The last time I did one, and I was like, oh, this will make it taste so much better. If I see that, I literally start to gag.
I know, it's horrible. And the second time around, I asked for Zofran.
Yeah, so smart. That's a great tip.
Yes, please do that, everybody listening.
Zofran's an anti-nausea medication if you don't know what it is. Yeah.
And that was a godsend.
That's a really, really good tip.
Yeah. So I had surgery. I woke up, they put an IUD in surgery. We decided on that. I have the Kyleena, it's the progesterone only.
Okay.
And he said, well, would you like me to place one during surgery? And I was like, wait, you can do that? That's a thing?
Yeah.
And so that's what I had done.
Okay.
The unfortunate part of that is I tore because they must have not used the tiny speculum. So I woke up not in any pain in my abdomen. You'd think it would be in my pain in my abdomen because I just had abdominal surgery, but I woke up talking about my vagina to the OR staff, which was a lot of fun, but healed quick. It was fine, but just not what I was expecting when I woke up from surgery.
Right.
But I remember being like so groggy. And I looked at my anesthesiologist and I was like, do I have endometriosis? Like, that's the first thing I asked.
Yeah.
Because I've been wondering this for years. Like, I thought I did, but nobody could tell me. And I looked at the clock because I remember what time I rolled in. I was like, he said if there's nothing wrong, then it'll probably be 1 hour. But it was 2 hours. So I was like, wonder if something was wrong. Like, I don't know.
Right.
And I was trying to gauge it by how long I was in there. And she goes, yeah. And I was like, yes. Like, as horrible as that sounds.
No, but you have an answer. I understand.
Happy. And I was like, first of all, I don't know. I was going back and forth every single day. Do I have it? Do I not? Do I have it? Do I not? Am I crazy? Like, is this all in my head? Is my pain getting better? Am I just getting used to it? Like, all these questions every single day, it was driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And I was like, how am I supposed to do anything? Like, if there's nothing wrong, I guess that would be good for me having kids. But then how am I supposed to manage this pain? Why am I in pain? Like, what's causing it? They told me I could have chronic pelvic pain without any underlying conditions. And I was like, okay, that's possible, but like, why would that just start all of a sudden and then get worse?
And progressively get worse, right? And you're not alone in that fear. So many people who have endo that for years, or maybe not even years, were told that they don't have it. When they wake up from surgery, that is the first thing they ask, because your fear is totally valid. Because if they said you didn't have it, then all of those questions that you just asked, like, then why do I have, it's just, it's such a fear for so many people who have this disease.
Yeah. And the thing is too, is like, there were a couple days where I don't want to say no pain, because I really didn't have no pain. It was always just like a minimal crampiness at all times. And then it would get worse. It felt like contractions.
Yeah.
Like all day, every day.
Yeah.
There was one day that I kept track. I'm like, I wonder how many I have in a day. So I kept a Post-it note on my desk and I tallied along, and I ended up with 48 for the day.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, I have a picture of myself taking a picture with this little thing. And I was like, this is what I live with.
Right.
Can these doctors listen to me?
Yeah.
So my specialist is an angel. I think about like how we found him and how he took time out of his busy day, to talk to some random nurse he'd never met about her daughter.
Yeah.
And he couldn't believe I had never had a pelvic exam before. And he was like, I don't know. I just love him to death. And I'm so grateful for him, because he didn't ever make me feel like I was crazy. He always told me there's a possibility that there's nothing wrong.
Right.
Sometimes we go in and we don't find anything wrong. He's like,
Sure.
I think it's endometriosis.
Yeah.
So I ended up having 4 lesions. It was stage 1.
Okay.
There was some on my uterosacral ligament, which explains
the back pain.
Mm-hmm. There were a couple spots on my posterior cul-de-sac, and then there were some on my ovarian fossa, I think. I don't even know what that is, but that's where it was. I'm not
a doctor, but I don't know where that is, but somewhere by the ovary, I have to guess.
He came over and said, he goes, you're not going to remember this conversation, but I do. He was like, you have endometriosis. I took care of it. I excised all of them. It was very superficial. He said, I don't care what pathology says, you have endometriosis. He's like, I sent it off. We'll find out.
Yeah.
But I'm 100% that's what it is.
Sure.
And I was like, okay. So I went home. I had the most just blissful recovery. And I hate to say that because I hear a lot of stories that are kind of nightmares of recovery.
But it's okay to have a good recovery too. Tell us about it. Give people hope.
Yeah. So he gave me like the strong pain medications. I never touched them. I never needed them. He gave me Celebrex, which is like a stronger ibuprofen.
Yeah.
So I took that and Tylenol for 3 days. And I really didn't need it, but I took it because I thought I should. I'm like, I just had surgery. Don't you think I should take pain medication? But the pain I was in did not even compare to a period, which that is when I knew that I was like, okay, you had a horrible time. Like I blocked it out.
The fact that you were in less pain after surgery recovery just speaks to how much pain you were really in on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I really don't even remember how horrible it was because I try to block it out of my memory, but that's when I was like, wow, like you were in a lot of pain.
Yes.
So I only had pain for about 3 days. The rest was just felt like pulled muscles.
Mm-hmm. Sore.
Yeah. The gas pain kind of lingered, but again, didn't compare. It kind of got stuck like under my ribs, which was fun. But
heating pad, if anyone's listening, a heating pad helps with that. After your surgery, they pump up your stomach with gas so they can see all the organs, I guess. Again, not a medical professional, but then the gas like gets trapped and it hurts like in your shoulder and ribs and.
Yes. But I was back to work after like 2 weeks, I think.
Oh, that's amazing. And you felt
fully functioning. Yeah. My first period after wasn't the best time.
Yeah.
But again, wasn't as bad as it was before.
Sure. And you were still healing. I mean,
yeah. I did bleed after surgery for about a week from the IUD, but it wasn't heavy at all, and it was not painful.
So how have the past couple months been? How are you feeling
so now it's been just over 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
Has it been 5 months? Almost 5 months.
Almost May, right? It was the end of April.
Yeah. So I haven't had that pain since.
Wow.
I just can't believe, like, I had the perfect story of, how he did it. Like he said, I asked him beforehand, I was like, you're going to do excision, right? And he was like, well, I try to where I can. He said, but there are some spots where I would rather do ablation for fertility purposes. And I was like, okay, like that scared me because I know, ablation is not, gold standard like excision is, but I just appreciate because he knew that fertility was very important to me, and he knew he kept that at the focus of everything he did. And I have just, I don't know. I just am so grateful for him. He's like my favorite human being.
I mean, that's so amazing that how, again, very serendipitous how everything just came together that one day that you happened to be calling your mom and crying in pain. And he definitely sounds like he was meant to be your doctor. That's for sure.
Yes, he definitely was. And he's a very busy man. He does surgery. He's a specialist. And he's also he runs a conference every year about endometriosis. He's trying to educate people. He's trying to educate doctors.
Good.
And it's like, he doesn't have to do any of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's passionate. He cares.
Yeah. And he's just the best. So
that's wonderful. That's so great. And you're feeling good.
Yeah.
So
are
there any other things that we didn't talk about, or things you want to add, or things that you've done to feel better? I mean, it sounds like you're feeling great now, which is just the best news.
Yeah. So I'm in an area that has 4 major hospitals, and I work for one of them. So me and my mom have pretty good health insurance. So I understand that isn't the case for everybody. So I feel bad saying, switch doctors. But that's what I think people need to realize is like, if I didn't switch doctors, I would have still thought I didn't have endometriosis, and I would have just dealt with it and been like, well, she told me I didn't have it, so I'm fine.
Yeah.
So I guess like my advice would be to switch doctors 100 times if you have to get somebody that not only listens to you, but genuinely cares about your wishes. I would have switched doctors 150 times to get to him because he's worth it.
Yeah.
And I would have, and I would have traveled to see him as well.
Sure.
Like, I think, some people don't have like very populated areas to where, you can get care.
Yes.
So if you have to travel to get that care, do what you got to do, because it's you don't deserve to be in pain every day.
No,
nobody does.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but you're 100% correct. You don't deserve to be in pain, and being in pain every day is not normal. It's not normal. It's your body telling you something's wrong.
Yeah.
And, I think you really recognize that. You were very intuitive about it. And I think just the fact that you knew someone that had endometriosis, I think helped you know what the word was and know what it was too, because I don't know, if you didn't know that friend, do you feel like you would have known what it was until you turned to like Google or, all of those types of things. So I think hence why we do the podcast, and you sharing your story, why this is so important, because it educates people on what endometriosis is, but it's so different for every person.
Yeah. Like the main thing that they say is like heavy bleeding. I never had heavy bleeding once.
Right.
So there's really no like cookie cutter.
No. And you had back pain. You started with back pain. I mean, most people probably wouldn't correlate that. You would think, oh, I lifted something, like it just, it just doesn't, it's the awareness isn't there. Right. And obviously yours turned into more pain, but it really started with back pain. And if you knew that at 16, what could have been different?
Right. But I mean, I was really only in pain suffering for like a year and a half, which in the whole grand scheme of things is not bad compared to the average time it takes to get diagnosed. So I feel like I was one of the lucky ones, but I wouldn't have gotten diagnosed if I didn't switch to him.
Yeah.
So you gotta, do your own research, because their research is not up to date, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree, and advocate for yourself. And like you said, I know access to care and doctors is challenging, but there is a show, I don't know where it's going to fall in line with the shows that I'm recording, but someone that an endo warrior I do have on the show talks about there are a lot of other options. Some hospitals are nonprofits and you can see the doctors that way. So I even learned a lot of different ways of if you have, and it's hard when you're in a lot of pain, but carving a little bit of time out to do that research and find avenues and ways to get the proper care.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Well, Cara, I really appreciate you being on. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up, or?
I don't think so. I will comment on whenever you share this to that Facebook group.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to like message me, I will be
great
fully
plug.
available.
Thank you so much. So for anyone who's listening, I do have a small Facebook group. I'm terrible about managing it because I'm trying to stay off Facebook right now or just always, I only go on my desktop. I got it off my phone because it's just too much sometimes.
Yeah.
But there is a small Facebook group of amazing endo warriors who have shared their stories and people who haven't shared their stories. And once the show goes live, people who have been on the show can have conversations back and forth, or if you just even want to connect with Cara. I don't know, Cara, if you want to share any of your social handles, don't feel like you have to.
I want to make a separate one for endometriosis. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah.
I really don't know how. So
anyone who wants to talk with Cara more, join the Facebook group. It's linked in the show notes. And I'm sure she would be willing to share, everything and anything with you and who her doctor is. And she's in upstate New York. You can say his name.
Let me tell you who my doctor is.
Yeah.
I see Dr. Mohammed Mahmoud. His last name is Mahmoud. Okay. He's in Rochester General Hospital. He's a godsend. I love him.
I'm sure he
is accepting new patients, by the way, too. So I told him about this, and he is willing to see anybody. So
well, that is very, very generous, and you've had so many kind things to say about him. So I'm sure he's very appreciative of that. Just like I'm so appreciative of you coming on and sharing your story, and how you got to where you are. And I'm so grateful that you're feeling so well.
Now I'm grateful for this podcast because if I didn't hear everybody else's stories, there were things from each person that I was like, oh my God, I have that too.
Yeah.
So it's very helpful.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming on, Cara.
Of course.